Welcome to Global Facts. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Why are there not more people talking about the trade war erupting at the world's longest undefended border? Good evening. Tonight, we bring you a story that is sending shockwaves across North America and beyond. In a move that has stunned diplomats and business leaders alike, a decision in Washington has triggered a full-blown trade war with Canada, America's closest neighbor and long-standing ally. The repercussions are already being felt on both sides of the border. The Trump administration's sweeping 10% tariff on all Canadian goods has sent shockwaves through the economies of both nations, threatening to unravel decades of carefully built economic partnership and trust. For many, this is more than just a policy change. It's a seismic shift in the relationship between two of the world's closest allies. This isn't just about economics. It's about the very fabric of our alliances, the intricate supply chains that power daily life, and the communities that have grown together over generations. From auto parts to groceries, the impact will be felt in every corner of both countries. The world's longest peaceful border, once a symbol of cooperation and friendship, is now at the center of a high-stakes economic conflict. With millions of jobs and livelihoods hanging in the balance, uncertainty looms large for families and businesses alike. President Trump insists these tariffs are necessary to protect American workers and industries from what he calls unfair trade practices. But critics, including economists and business owners, warn that the fallout could be severe. Factory closures, job losses, and higher prices for everyday goods could soon become the new reality for countless families. The new tariffs threaten to grind cross-border trade to a halt, creating chaos for businesses that rely on just-in-time deliveries and making life harder for consumers from Detroit to Vancouver. The ripple effects could extend far beyond the border, impacting global supply chains and international markets. In the coming days, we'll explore how we reach this critical moment, break down the details of the tariffs, and hear from the fierce opposition, governors, labor unions, and Canadian officials, who are fighting to protect their communities and economies. The stakes could not be higher. Today's decision threatens to redefine North America's economic landscape for years, if not decades, to come. The outcome of this trade war will shape the future of millions. Join us as we examine how a single policy has put an entire continent on edge, and what it could mean for the future of the world's longest undefended border. To grasp today's crisis, we must look back at the US-Canada trade relationship. NAFTA, launched in 1994, created a vast free trade zone, integrating supply chains and supporting millions of jobs. A car built in Michigan might cross the border several times before completion. Proof of deep economic ties. The USMCA, signed in 2020, updated this framework, but kept the core promise of mostly tariff-free North America. Yet the Trump administration's protectionist turn has repeatedly threatened this stability, with tariffs looming over every negotiation. Today's blanket tariff against Canada is the culmination of years of uncertainty, a move that contradicts the spirit of the very agreement the administration once celebrated. The foundation of North American trade is now in jeopardy. This morning, the White House announced a 10% tariff on all Canadian imports, an unprecedented, across-the-board tax. Canada, a G7 and NATO ally, is now the target of sweeping economic penalties, justified by claims of national security and unfair trade practices. Historically, disputes over dairy or lumber were managed through negotiation, not blanket tariffs on $400 billion in trade. The new cost hits businesses overnight. Automakers, steel importers, and grocers must now absorb or pass on higher prices. The administration bypassed USMCA's dispute mechanisms, opting for unilateral action that critics say undermines international trade law. The message: the White House will act alone, even if it means economic chaos at home and alienating its closest ally. The machinery of North American trade is grinding to a halt. The consequences will be immediate and far-reaching. The backlash from U.S. governors was swift and bipartisan. 15 governors from key border and manufacturing states condemned the tariffs, warning of catastrophic harm to industries and jobs. They highlighted the integrated auto supply chain, where a 10% tariff at each crossing could cripple American carmakers. Farmers, too, face retaliation from Canada, threatening vital export markets. These governors aren't arguing theory, they're fighting for their constituents' livelihoods. Their unified opposition puts the White House in a tough spot, as state leaders demand a reversal of a policy they say will devastate local economies. The governor's revolt gives voice to millions whose jobs depend on open trade. They're demanding action before the damage becomes irreversible. America's largest labor unions, including the AFL-CIO and United Auto Workers, have forcefully opposed the new tariffs, calling them a direct attack on the livelihoods of millions of working families. Union leaders have taken to the streets and airwaves, warning that these policies threaten the very foundation of American industry. They argue these measures will destroy, not protect, American jobs, especially in manufacturing, where supply chains cross the border repeatedly. Many factories rely on a seamless flow of parts and materials between the US and Canada, and any disruption could have devastating consequences for workers and their communities. A 10% tariff compounds with every crossing, adding thousands to the cost of a single vehicle and threatening layoffs and plant closures. For industries like automotive, where components may cross the border several times before a car is finished, the added costs quickly spiral out of control, making American-made products less competitive both at home and abroad. Union leaders say the administration's policy misunderstands modern manufacturing, where Canadian parts are essential to American-made products. They emphasize that today's cars, appliances, and machinery are built from a complex web of international cooperation, not isolated national efforts. The result? Higher prices, lost jobs, and economic insecurity for the very workers the tariffs claim to help. Families already struggling with inflation could see everyday goods become even more expensive, while communities dependent on manufacturing face an uncertain future. This rare alliance of unions, governors, and business leaders underscores the widespread alarm. Across party lines and industries, leaders are uniting in an urgent call for the administration to reconsider, warning that the stakes are too high for political gamesmanship. Workers on the factory floor are worried about their paychecks and futures. Many fear that layoffs and reduced hours could soon become a harsh reality, threatening their ability to provide for their families. Their message, loud and clear, is that a trade war with Canada is a reckless gamble, not a path to prosperity. They urge policymakers to listen to those who will bear the brunt of these decisions. The administration faces mounting pressure from those it promised to protect, as the chorus of concern grows louder with each passing day. Ottawa's response was swift and resolute. Prime Minister Trudeau condemned the tariffs as unjustified, vowing dollar-for-dollar retaliation. Canada is preparing targeted tariffs on U.S. goods, aiming to maximize political pressure in key American states. The fallout won't be limited to border regions. Retaliation will hit communities across the U.S. Canadian leaders are also considering a long-term pivot, reducing reliance on the U.S. and seeking new trade partners in Europe and Asia. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney warns that protectionism is a dead end, urging Canada to chart its own course. The Canadian public, feeling betrayed, overwhelmingly supports a tough response. Generations of goodwill have been damaged, and the consequences will extend far beyond trade. Canada's government now has a strong mandate to fight back. The stage is set for a prolonged and bitter dispute. The shockwaves from the escalating trade war are not limited to the United States and Canada. They reverberate across the entire continent, sending ripples of uncertainty through every corner of North America. Mexico, as the third partner in the USMCA agreement, is watching events unfold with growing anxiety. There are deep concerns that the trade war could destabilize the intricate supply chains that bind the region together, threatening jobs and investment on both sides of the border. Mexican officials are especially worried that if the U.S. is willing to target Canada, then Mexico could easily be next in line. This fear is making investors and business leaders increasingly cautious, as the risk of sudden policy changes grows. Meanwhile, the American business community is nearly unanimous in its alarm. Executives, entrepreneurs, and workers alike are voicing their concerns about the far-reaching consequences of the trade war. The Chamber of Commerce and major industry groups have issued urgent warnings, arguing that American businesses and families will ultimately pay the price, facing higher costs for everyday goods, shrinking export markets, and the threat of layoffs as companies struggle to adapt. Auto executives in particular had cautioned the president that new tariffs would add billions of dollars in costs, disrupt production, and erase hard-earned profits. Despite their repeated warnings, their advice was largely ignored, leaving the industry bracing for impact. In a rare show of unity, governors, union leaders, and business executives have come together to oppose the policy, underscoring just how serious and far-reaching the consequences could be for the entire economy. The consensus among economists and industry experts is clear. This trade war is a disastrous mistake. Instead of strengthening the American economy, it threatens to weaken it, putting growth and prosperity at risk. As uncertainty spreads, North America's economic future hangs in the balance, leaving businesses, workers, and families across the continent wondering what comes next. Economists are nearly unanimous. These tariffs are a tax on American consumers and a recipe for disruption. American companies importing Canadian goods must pay the levy, passing costs to consumers through higher prices on cars, groceries, and more. Experts warn that tariffs will fuel inflation, making life harder for families and complicating the Federal Reserve's efforts to stabilize the economy. While the administration claims to protect jobs, most economists predict net job losses as industries reliant on Canadian imports suffer. The interconnectedness of the two economies means punishing one hurts both. The expert consensus: this is economic self-harm, risking a damaging trade war and destabilizing the world's most successful trading relationship. The move is seen as driven by politics, not economic reality. The risks of recession and strained international relations are rising. Tonight, North America stands on a knife's edge. The Trump administration's 10% tariff on Canada has upended decades of economic cooperation. A powerful coalition, governors, unions, business leaders, now stands united in opposition, warning of inflation, job losses, and retaliation. The USMCA is undermined, and America's reputation as a reliable partner is in question. The future is uncertain. Will domestic opposition or Canadian retaliation force a change, or will the conflict escalate? Millions of livelihoods hang in the balance as the economic web binding the continent unravels. Today will be remembered as a turning point in North American relations. The story is far from over. Good night.